Welcome to another exciting Blender tutorial. Today we're going to be making the scan effect for our scanner bot. Let's jump into it. Now that I've got my shot figured out, I've got both my shots done, the last thing I want to do is to set up the scan effect. So he's going to fly up to this asteroid and scan it. So we need to create something that's going to give us that look. So first thing I want to do is make sure I'm not locked into my camera view. Pop out of that. I can get rid of this second view over here. What we're going to do to create this effect is we're going to use a plane, and we could create it in a separate project file to keep things clean, but I think it's just going to be easier to do it in context. We can actually see how it looks in the scene with the objects as we've got them. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and I'm going to put it where my hero guy is. So let's Shift S, and we're going to go cursor to selected, and I'll just turn on my grid controls. Actually, I can hide my grid. I can keep my other controls on, hide the grid, because the grid's a little confusing to look at. So I'm just going to turn that off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to create a mesh, and I'm going to create a plane. Okay, I can get out of rendered view. We don't need to be in rendered view for this. All right, I'm going to line up this plane with my scanner bot, and I'll just hit the full stop key just to center my view on this guy. And I wanted to basically have the same kind of orientation as the scanner bot. So let's see, what is our scanner guy? He's, is it 55 on the Y? So if we come over here and go 55, they're going to be fairly lined up. Not quite lined up at all, actually. Unless, is he parented to something? Just double check. Scanner bot, 55, -17. We can just copy those values over. So -177. And yeah, that puts me right on 55. And then what's the other one? -5.24. -5.24. All right, so now my plane is oriented exactly the same as my little scanner bot. So now this is going to work a little bit easier for us. Now I'll parent this to the scanner bot. So I'll control click the scanner. Actually, I'll do it over here so it's easier. So select my plane, and then I will control click my scanner bot and hit Control P to parent. Okay, I'm going to rotate him on the X 90 degrees. So he's bisecting the scanner bot. And I'm going to grab him on the Y. I'm set to local. So actually I'll pull out my handles, just make this a little bit easier. And I'll just bring it forward so that it's intersecting right about there. I want sort of this top end to be right inside my scanner bot. This bottom end is going to be what's going to actually scan the asteroid. Okay. Now we're a little off, it looks like. So we have to change his orientation some so that it matches. And what I might do even as well, let's move we're going to move the origin point right up to here. So if I go into edit mode for this plane and select these top two vertices, what I can do is I can hit, let's see, Shift S, and I can go cursor to selected, and that's going to put the cursor right at the medium point of these two guys, right at that location. Then I can jump out of edit mode, and with the object selected, I can go up here to object, set origin to 3D cursor, and that's going to put the origin right up there exactly where I want it. So that means I can rotate this guy like, on the Y, for example, and it's going to rotate like this, like a paddle, and that's going to be really good. That's what I want. And now we need to fix up the orientation of our scanner bot so it's actually pointing at the asteroid. I'm going to do this with the handles because it's going to be just a little bit easier. Just going to rotate him like this. And then to make this even easier, I'm going to go ahead and go into edit mode. Select these two vertices, and still in local mode so that we're dragging in the local coordinates. I'm just going to drag this all the way out so it's intersecting the geometry of our asteroid. Okay, so this is going to help us see exactly where he's looking. So let's grab the scanner bot again, and we need to update this rotation that we've just changed about him. So I'm going to hit the AI here for this keyframe, that'll replace that keyframe, and now he's going to be scanning it. So now we can have a look at where he's actually looking. And you can see we're kind of all over the place with the scan. So let's go to the next keyframe. And let's rotate him back on to, there we go, rotate him back onto the asteroid. Okay, so what is this thing and how's it going to work? Let me center my view on it with the full stop key. And we're going to create a shader that basically creates the same effect as a bunch of lasers. First thing I'm going to start off with is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click new, create a new material. Call this scan lasers. And what we're going to create with this material is, first off, we want to have like a shaped cone of lasers pointed at this object, at the asteroid. Okay. In order to get it shaped, we're going to have to actually kind of manipulate the way it's rendering it out. So I'll explain that as we get going. But the way we want to begin is we want to create a noise shader, and we want to stretch it out across this plane so it becomes these like streaks, these lines. Okay, so let's start with that. We'll create a noise shader. So Shift A to create a new node, and then just start typing in noise in the search bracket. And we can pipe the factor into the emission, just have a quick look at it. And you can see there it is. Now let's take let's create a texture coordinate node and a mapping node. And let's take the object coordinate and pipe it into the vector. And then the vector, let's stick that into the vector as well. There we go. So now it's appropriately placing it on the object. You can see it ignores the scale, whereas generated wasn't ignoring the scale. So this is just a cool difference between the two. And then what we want to do is we want to stretch it out on the, let's do it on the X. So we'll make X, we could actually make X 0, and that's going to be nothing but straight lines now. And then we can change the scale here to bring them down a little bit. And then I can create a color ramp and stick that right here. And this we can use to increase the contrast so that we get more sharp lines, just like so. And now the scale is going to make those lines smaller or bigger. And then we can use this to kind of remove lines and add lines and get the right kind of setup, right amount of lasers in the scene. Back a little bit to start with. Okay, now these are going to be the lasers. We want them to be generating from like the focal point, like the center of the eye here, and traveling out. But in order to do that, it's a little difficult to manipulate the position if we're doing it within the texture. So we actually want to do it in the object itself. But let me show you. If I was to go into edit mode and then grab this vertex and this vertex and scale them on the Y, you can see that what's happening is it's not actually changing the angle of the material. It's just changing the shape of the object, but it's like it's just being projected on the object. So we want to actually morph these lines. We want these lines to change. So in order to pull that off, what we need to do is change what texture coordinate we're using, okay? If we switch this over to UV, it's going to use the UV map of this material. Now, again, just as a refresher, if you're not familiar, we come over here to the UV editor and I go into edit mode and hit A to select all. We should be able to see, where is it? I just go unwrap. So if I come over to the UV editor and go up here and click UV unwrap, it's going to unwrap the UV of this. And remember, this is the UV now of this object, which basically it's a corresponding polygon laid over a flat 2D texture. So we're telling Blender how to orient the texture on this. We can like change these points and stuff, and you can see it's going to be moving our material. Now, if we were to take these 2 points here and scale them, you can see it does start to change the shape of things, but in kind of a weird and unpredictable way. Now, I can link up the two. Where is it? Right there. So if I switch back to vertex mode, and with this little mode selected, which is UV sync selection, I can shift select these two vertices here, and it'll show me which ones are the corresponding vertices on the UV. So I can scale these guys now on the X, which is what we were wanting to do, but you can see it's just not working, and it's not correct. In fact, it's even oriented the wrong way. So first thing I'm going to select it, and I'm going to rotate on the X 90 degrees. Right, so now it's oriented correctly. I can position it in the middle here. And we can even scale it up on the Y, just fit it to this kind of square shape. Now, if I was coming here and if I scale these 2 points on the actual geometry, you can see we're getting the same problem. It's breaking up the UV. And that's because Blender's just confused. It doesn't really know what's going on here because we only have 4 vertices. Not a lot of geometry to work with. So we actually need to give it a lot more geometry. So let's just hit A to select all. We're going to go F3 and then type in subdivide. And then in the subdivide menu, we can just come up here. We can just increase this, just roll this up to something like 10. Okay, so now we got a bunch more subdivisions, right? All right, so now we've got all these subdivisions. What we can do is we can grab this whole row here. If I just go into edge mode and just alt click that whole row and then scale that on the Y, you can see it's actually behaving appropriately now. So if I switch on my proportional editing mode and go to linear, I can now scale these guys on the Y and drag up on my mouse there to increase the wheel size for how much is being affected. And now it's proportionally scaling all of it together. And you can see we're getting the effect we want. So I'm just going to scale these guys right down so that they're really, really small. There we go. So now we've got this cool scan cone kind of thing. Now, if I switch into transparent mode so I can actually see through things, alt click this edge here. I could do the same kind of thing. I could scale up on the Y. And again, make sure that you roll your mouse wheel so that the entire object is selected. And I can scale it up. And what I want to do is I want to make sure it kind of never really leaves the geometry of the asteroid. For this effect to work, I kind of want it to stay inside the whole time. So I'm going to have a look at how it goes if we actually end up, yeah, it's fine. It looks like it stays inside. All right, great. So we got our geometry working, and because of that, now we've got the basic material working as well. Let's switch back to our shader editor. And so the next step is we want to have everywhere where there's white, where these lines are, to be opaque, and we want the dark bits to be transparent. So we want this to drive the alpha. So we can actually just plug this right in, because remember with the alpha channel, wherever you have black or the value 0, it's transparent. Wherever you have white or the value 1, it's opaque. So if I pop that into the alpha, and then remember, because we're working with Eevee, we got to open up the side menu here and come down to options, and we're going to set the blend mode to alpha blend. Shadow mode, we don't really want this thing casting shadows because it's just going to be a laser in the scene. So I'm going to click none for that, and I'm going to close that up. All right, so now if I come in real close, you'll see we can actually see through this guy. All right, so it's working. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is we want to create the sort of shimmer effect that you get with a laser. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so we can see this up close. And we can also go ahead and change our color from white. Well, actually, because we're using this for the alpha, I just want to make sure I don't mess with that. So I'm going to Shift D to duplicate this color ramp. And I will take this one and use it to drive the factor of this one, which will then drive the emission. Then what we could do is drag this right back out. So if you drag the color ramp fully out like this, it's not going to be affecting this at all. Whereas you can see if I start dragging this thing in, it's going to be kind of doubling up. So I can make this like a green. Actually, what we'll do is we'll set red and blue to 0, and we'll have green at 1. And then we can come here as well. We go to the HSV, go to the vibrancy, and type in like 3 or something, and that's going to make it really bright. All right, so the next thing we want to do is create the dust patterns. Basically, we want to create the effect of the laser beam hitting dust. If you know in real life, if you shine a laser, in a dark room, you're going to see these little like flecks of light in the laser where it's intersecting with dust particles. So we want to do that same effect here. So what we can do is create a noise node. So let's create for a noise texture. So Shift A, and then in the search box, type noise. And let's just, so we can see exactly what we're looking at. Let's unplug the alpha and unplug this emission. So we'll just go back to our plain old ordinary plane, and we'll plug the factor of the noise into the emission. And now you can see it a little bit there. If you just bring the scale up, it's going to be more and more visible. So I just want to drag that right up. And I'm also going to create a color ramp node and just drop that in here. So I can create a little more contrast. Pull that up and bring this in. And then drag my scale right up. So something like this, okay? So now what we want to do is we want to multiply this image on top of this image. And again, multiplication is just like in math. You think about if you multiply black, which is the value 0, with anything in here, it's going to get rid of it. It's going to turn it into 0 as well. Whereas 1 is going to leave it, and it's going to be the same. So if we grab a mix RGB, and we bring this one into there, and this one into here, and then switch to multiply and just turn the factor all the way up. So we want to fully multiply these together. And then stick that into the emission. There we go. Cool. So yeah, now it kind of looks like a laser. We're getting these like little flecks. What I could do is take this black and just bring it up a little bit. That means it'll never fully disappear. So it's sort of like sometimes it's full green and sometimes it's a little bit dim. There we go. That looks pretty cool. All right, now we just need to rehook up our alpha again. So we can just grab the color output and pipe that back into the alpha. And now it's all working really well. Now, one thing that isn't working well is if I just move through in my frames, the lasers aren't really changing. They're staying the same the whole time. And if these guys are moving through dust motes, it should be constantly changing, right? So every time it moves even just a little bit, these lasers change. We probably also want these lasers to be moving around as well. So we need to figure out a way to move this texture based on the position of this object. So to pull that off, what we want to do is first we want to create a node that's basically going to read the position of this object. And there's a cool node called the geometry node. So let's grab that. You can see the geometry node gives us a bunch of different outputs, and one of them happens to be the position. Now, this is referring to whatever this material is assigned to. So it's the geometry this material is assigned to. What's the position of that object? So that's what we can grab here, and we can throw that down here. Now, what that's going to do is now wherever this object is, it's going to move this noise texture. Now, we may need to adjust the scale, but you can see that it's working pretty well. Yeah, I think we need to bring the scale back down. There we go. Something like 33 is looking pretty good. Now, to get these lasers to actually constantly be moving, I think what's going to look coolest is if we use the Y value, because then it's like they're actually kind of moving up and down. It looks like a scan kind of effect. So we want to animate this Y value, but I want to have it just kind of continually animate throughout the entire scene. I don't have to keep updating my keyframes so that, in case I get too far out or something. So in order to do that, what I can do is I can right click on here and so insert single keyframe. So I've inserted just a keyframe here on the Y value. And then down here in my dub sheet, I'm actually going to change this over to the graph editor. And then there's this little hidden pop-out menu. I'm just going to click on that. I'm going to make sure this mapping node is selected. And you can see we suddenly get all these options because of this button right here, which is the only show selected. So when this is turned on, it's only going to show you what's selected. It's great for just filtering out your view. And you can see where we've got this thing called plane and then scan lasers. So plane is the object that we're working on, and the scan laser is the name of the material. You can see we've got this animated keyframe. So it's showed us this. Now, if we open up this little drop-down menu, it says shader node tree, which is the node. This is the node tree. Open that up, and there we go. Y default value. Now that's what this is right here. Okay, so we can just zoom out a little bit, and there we go. There's the keyframe that we created. Now, what I want to do is have this keyframe the value of this constantly change. By creating a keyframe here, I can get access to this modifier stack. If I didn't have a keyframe here, I wouldn't have all this. It wouldn't let me see it. So that's why I put one keyframe. It doesn't matter where that keyframe goes or what value it has, but we just go right here and we're going to go for a generator. And the default one that gets added in is called additive. And that's all we really want. And this is just going to basically add in a value throughout the animation. You can see what happened here is actually now my curve has this angle to it. Now I can change the value, but I think 1 is going to be enough of what we want. So yeah, you can see now as I'm moving through there, it's constantly scanning. We can see how this is moving. Yeah, great. So now you can see it really looks like it's actually scanning. Now we need to turn this thing on and off naturally. So let's do that. We're going to have it come on right about here, I think. Now we can do this a couple of different ways. We could animate this from within the shader itself, but I think the easiest thing might be just to animate the object, so the plane. I'm going to go ahead and name my plane. Let's see, scan cone. So we're going to animate this thing in 2 different passes. So we're going to have the first, we'll have it kind of shoot out as a single beam, and then it's going to expand out to this shape. Okay. So I'm going to come forward just a few frames, and I'm going to set a keyframe for the scale. All right. And I'll do it for the X, Y, and the Z. I'm going to come back maybe 5 frames. And then I'm going to take the Y scale and just bring it right down so that it's at maybe like 0.1, 0.01. Let's get it really small. There we go. So I'll set a keyframe there. And I'll also go ahead and set a keyframe for X and Y, X and Z, even though we haven't done anything. And then I'm going to come back maybe 3 frames, and I will take the Z, take the X, that's what we want, take the X value and just bring it right up to 0. In fact, I'm going to I'll 0 out the Z as well, just to be safe. And then I'll hit I, and I. All right, so now it's basically zeroed out inside the scanner bot. So if we hit play, you can see it does this pop out effect where it scans out and then it expands. We switch to rendered view, go back to our camera, you can see what that looks like. It's like a single laser. Then it opens up, scans, and then we need it to retract. Okay, so let's find the point where it goes in. So we'll start the retracting right about here. So I'll set that keyframe again for the scale, and we'll come forward 1, 2, 3, and we'll take the Y 0.01. There we go. And set keyframe for these guys as well. And then we'll go forward 1, 2, 3, and take this Z down to 0 and the X down to 0. Cool. Now I might move it a little bit sooner. I'm going to switch back to my dope sheet so I can control those keyframes a bit easier. And I could just grab all those keyframes right there and just drag them in a little bit. The next thing that we need is where this is intersecting the asteroid. You can see it kind of looks just like this harsh line. And what's going to make this look realistic, look like it's actually here, is if we have some kind of responsiveness on the asteroid itself. In order to do that, we need to have a new material that's going to be specifically on the asteroid. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is create this sort of scan line that follows the contour of the asteroid, wherever this thing is intersecting with it. This is going to be a really cool effect, all right? So what we want to do this is we're actually going to use an object to generate a texture coordinate for a material that's going to sit on top of this asteroid, and it's going to generate this glowy line that follows wherever these lasers are hitting, okay? So to do that, what we want to do is first we're going to create an empty that's going to give us the exact position that we want, okay? So I want to go ahead and let's go into edit mode for the cone, and I want to switch to, let's get out of rendered mode, and we'll just select, I think maybe let's grab the final one out here. And we'll hit Shift S and cursor to selected. Get out of edit mode, and we're going to hit Shift A and create a plain axis empty. All right, now that we've created this empty here, we need to orient it in the same direction as the scan cone. If you remember, the scan cone has this orientation derived from the scanner bot, which it's parented to. So what we need to do is take the orientation of this guy and paste it into this guy. So we just grab these. So grab the X, copy that, paste that. Grab the Y, copy, paste, and grab the Z. There we go. Great. Now it's oriented correctly. Now what we can do is we can then select the empty, control click the scan code, and control P to parent it. So now it's parented to this. So now it's oriented in the same direction, and it's parented to the end of our scanner cone. So it's going to be moving around. And we're going to call this the scan location. And this is going to be what we use to drive our material. So let's come back over here to our asteroid and just select one of these guys. Now we've got multiple asteroids. In this case, I've got multiple stacked up, so I'll need to assign this to all of them. But I'm just going to take the material tab, and I'm just going to click on the 2 documents here, and that's going to turn this into a fresh new material. Now I'm going to switch over to rendered view. And with this material, I want to add in a texture coordinate node. Now we're doing this within the actual asteroid material, okay? So texture coordinate node and a gradient node, gradient texture node. There we go. Now we're going to use the location of this scan location object to drive the texture coordinate of this gradient texture. Okay, so we'll come over here and we can grab, see, it's called scan location. There it is. And now we can take the object coordinate. So that's the only one that refers to this input. So by telling we want to use this object, we got to use this object output. And then what we can do is grab a color ramp as well, so we can control the size of this gradient. And I'm just going to pipe this straight into the emission of our material. Now it's going to add this emission right on top of the existing material itself. Okay. Now let's grab this guy and let's position it. Something like this, I think. So it's not showing, it may not be showing up for you right away. And that's because what you need to do is we need to just change the orientation of our scan location a little bit. So I'm going to rotate this thing on the Y, I think. And yeah, you can see there it is. It's coming around. So I'll try rotating on the Z. I actually want to get it so that it's up and down vertical. There we go. That's pretty good. And I'm just going to line this gradient line up so that it's just right on top of where this laser is hitting. You kind of just have to eye it up. I'm rotating on the Z. And then with this gradient texture, let's come back into this over here. I'm going to hit plus to create a new node on my color ramp. Let's give it a second to catch up. And then I'm going to make this one black. So basically what we've done is we've created a gradient that goes from black to white, back to black again, and we're piping it into the emission. So that's why it's not erasing our whole material, it's just adding in this extra layer. All right, now I can narrow these guys up a touch, and actually we can just center it right over the end here. And let's have a look at where that's lining up. That looks pretty good. It's pretty much on the money, right where we want it to be. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is we want to cut it off so that it's only appearing where we actually have this scan cone itself. And we're going to have to do that manually. All right. So let's come up here, we'll grab these guys and we'll move them. Let's move them back a bit. Give ourselves a little bit more room. And we can move this out. Now let's use we're going to use a gradient texture. We're going to use a different mode to kind of cut this thing out. So I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate that. And we're going to switch this one to spherical. And I'll keep using this for now. I'll see how it turns out. And I'll create a new color ramp. And this one, I'll just delete that one. And I'll just drag this out so we can see what it looks like. I'll drag the factor in. Doesn't really matter if you use color or factor in this case. And I'm going to drag this straight into the emission so we can just see it by itself. So bring that in a little bit there. And let's have a look at how this thing is shaped. All right, so we're going to need to reposition it a little bit to get this to work. Now we've added this thing in, but you can see the spherical texture is not showing up yet. So we just need to, we don't want to move the scan location object itself. We could try scaling it, and that you can see as we scale it up, it starts to appear. So that's cool. And that's not going to affect the other system, having it scaled. So that could be one way of bringing it in. I'll just scale it up a little bit so we can actually kind of see it some. And then I'm going to come back over to my asteroid. And I just create a mapping node in here, and that'll help us to have a little bit more control over this and move it around some more. So let's grab a mapping node, drop it right on top. And now what I can do is I can just move this a little bit. I think on the Y is all we need to do. Yeah. So we'll just come forward some. And then I'm going to drag this down. I can even go back to my scan location. I can scale it. And I just kind of want to get it to a point where it's sort of including this, this area that we want to have. So it's going to make more sense, I think, once we put it all together. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and assign it as well to these other asteroids. So I'm going to go ahead and find all the other asteroids that make up this group. And I will assign this material to it. So what we want to do is we want to multiply this one in with this one here, so that again, wherever there's white, it'll just keep things as they are. But wherever there's black, so these bits over here, there's no emission, it's going to cut it off. So that way we'll get rid of the bits of the line that we don't want. So let's go for a mix RGB, drop that right here. We're going to switch to multiply, and we're going to grab the color of this one and drag it right in, and we'll turn this all the way up to the max. So now you can see it's cutting it off. So now we just need to line things up so that it actually cuts off in the right area. So let me go ahead and go back down to my scan location. I'm going to change the scale, maybe right to there. And I just need to play with these values till we get it looking just right. So let's just mess around with this for a minute. And also to help me visualize, I'm going to go ahead and change the color of this ramp. So just right here, I'll just click on, zoom right in, click on that, the white one, and we're going to make this the green color. So just make red and blue 0, have green be 1, and I'm going to change my vibrancy up to like 5, let's say. There we go. And I can probably even drag these guys in a touch more. Just to narrow it up even further. There we go. All right, let's see how that's looking. So you can see as this thing sweeps over the asteroid, it's going to create this really nice line that intersects wherever it's coming. Now we've got little bits here like where we're not showing up, so we just need to play with the position again until it's really in the right spot. And I think also the scale. Yeah, that looks right. Perfect. Okay, cool. Now, we could have the same kind of noise texture as well appear on this, which I think would probably be a good idea. So let's go ahead and do that too. So I'm just going to create a noise and multiply it into all this as well. So I'm going to grab the noise texture, and I'll grab a new texture coordinate node. And it doesn't have to be a new one. You could use the same one as before. And actually, instead of that, we could use the geometry node like we did with the other system. And grab that, put it into the position, and then we're going to grab another mix RGB, drop it here, switch it to multiply, grab another color ramp, and drop that one here, and then we're going to take the factor and plug that in. And we'll move this one out here, and grab this one, plug it there, turn it all the way up, and then we can drag these together, create that contrast. And then we can increase the scale. Nice. Looks pretty cool. So now you can see we get these nice little dots, and they create this really nice laser scan effect. So let me pull this back and actually have a look at how this shot has turned out. Well, that's all we've got time for today. I hope you've really had a good time with this episode and you've learned some really fantastic tricks. This scan thing is a lot of fun to play with, and using multiple materials to create an effect like this and using the object and position coordinates of nulls and empties. I mean, it's a lot of powerful tools there for you to play with to really kind of pull together some really cool abstract concepts. Now, something like this, you do have to play around quite a while until you get it just right, but once it starts working, it just works really, really well. And now we've got this reusable scan material that we can, use in other projects as well. So anyways, I hope you've really enjoyed today's episode. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for watching all the episodes. Really appreciate all the feedback. Thanks for liking and subscribing if you were into this episode. If you want to find out more, you can check out the Patreon. We've got a lot of other things as well. We've got about 10 different episodes over there that are exclusive to the patrons about how to model the hero ship and how to model the spider bot as well that we'll be using later on in the project. And as well as the project files and stuff you can get a hold of over there to download and use, including this one as well. So check that out if you haven't already. Also check us out on Blender Market. We got a lot of cool things over there for sale. So thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode. See ya.